If you watch someone you love having a bad death, that memory obliterates all the happy times. And I don't want that to happen. I don't want, to be that sort of victim in their lives. I think I would get them to do a free vote on assisted dying. I think it's important that the law catches up with what the country wants.
Well, assisted suicide is banned in England, Wales and Northern Ireland with a maximum prison sentence of 14 years. But Dame Esther says people should be given the choice about how and when they want to die. Well, joining us now is Dame Esther Rantzen's daughter, Rebecca Wilcox. Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on to discuss this really important topic of conversation. How did your mum address this with you? Is it something that you've had a conversation about as a family, or did she say to you, this is what I want, and how did you feel about that?
Well, if you've met my mum, she doesn't come to decisions lightly and she doesn't change her mind. So by the time we heard about it, it was intractable law in our house. So she has done a documentary, she's written books, she's done articles about how to have a good death. And actually cancer came out relatively okay in terms of pain management and keeping your faculties. Obviously, there are different types of cancer and different ways to go. But she has always said that she wants to have a dignified life and a dignified death. And the process of dying replaces and supersedes your family's memories if it's a terrible death. And I know that when my father died, all we thought about for years were those last seconds, those last moments when it was tubes, there was blood, there was beeping, there were nurses, there were doctors, there was a lot of crying. And that's all I could remember of my father for so long. And Mum has had such a life, such a legacy, even as a mother, let alone as the campaigner broadcaster that she's known as. So just to remember her in pain and unhappy would be awful, a waste, such a waste.
The death of your mother, your redoubtable mother, venerable mother, Rebecca, will not only, of course, be a great tragedy for you, but it will be a tragedy for the nation. And I think this is about dignity. I'm sure you followed the story of another Dame Diana Rigg, who her daughter recently released tapes that Diana recorded just before her very undignified death. And Diana basically said, why do I have to go through this? I'm not going to go into the details, but you know what I'm talking about. This is about dignity, and I find it extraordinary that these are our bodies. We should be able to make these decisions. We're adults, and yet a bunch of politicians decide, no, 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 in this respect, we're in charge of your bodies, and you can't do that. That's against the law. We hereby sentence you or your relatives to 14 years in prison for taking them to Switzerland to go to Dignitas. That is it's just an anachronism. It's absurd, is it not?
We do so many brilliant things in this country. I think palliative care and the NHS, obviously I'm not the only person or the first person to ever say this, but they are brilliant heroes and geniuses. But the fact that we make laws based on disasters and they are reactionary, so the Dangerous Dogs Act, for instance, it's looking at the worst case scenario. And yes, there are evil people out there who would abuse a law to allow assisted dying to get whatever they wanted to get from the person that was dying if they were vulnerable. But they are a few. And when Mum did the documentary, How to Have a Good Death, there was a survey, and it was without a shadow of a doubt, everybody said that you should be allowed to choose how you die. So why don't we protect and take precautions to stop the nefarious view, as it were, but also allow people to go gently, to have the death they want. I mean, I have 2 young children, and when it came to the process of giving birth, I was given every option. I wrote out a very detailed birth plan. I spoke with many doctors and midwives. And I think the same process and the same consideration and the same respect should be applied to death, that we should have conversations, that you should have a midwife for death, as it were, or a death doula, if you want. And that will make everybody more aware of what happens. And I think power comes from knowledge in this situation. If you know what's about to happen and you are able to tell your loved ones what you want and you write out a birth plan stroke death plan, why shouldn't that be enacted? That's your wish. It is your wish to take the medicine that prolongs your life. Why aren't you allowed to take the medicine that ends your life?
Absolutely.
The difficulty, of course, that you and your family might face is if your mother were to choose to, in her words, buzz off to Zurich. It puts you in a difficult position about whether or not you can go with her, because that would leave you at the mercy of whether the police would then want to prosecute you for potentially assisting her. Is that something else you've sort of worked around and figured out how you might do that?
It's impossible, isn't it? Because I can't even say to you, I would support Mum on her journey to Dignitas, because if I said that, that's legally murky. I mean, obviously in my head, I would have thought that I would never let her go alone to somewhere like that. But I'm a busy working mum. I can't leave my children to pop off to jail while she's buzzing off to Switzerland. So the fact is only 3 people a year get prosecuted. But the actual process of going through a court case, and what is the worst time of my life so far, you know, Mum is my person. I do not want to live without her. I will have to live without her. And please, please don't make it worse for me by accusing me of murdering her and making me go through what would be a terrifying legal process.
That, Rebecca, is the other absurdity of this saga, is that when people do assist their loved ones in taking their own lives, and don't forget, it's not always at Dignitas, people do it here. Invariably, the courts take the humane decision. You know, they don't sort of say, all right, you get 14 years, you can't do that. They understand, and we all understand. So you have a bunch of politicians in Parliament banning this, you know, saying, well, no, we have control of your bodies, not you. Ridiculously, people who help their nearest and dearest, people they've been married to for 50 years, to take their own life, end up in court. And the courts, of course, turn around and say, you're not a murderer, you know, off you go. Sorry for your loss. So once again, the whole system is ridiculous. Now, your mother's, I hate to put it this way, shall we say, not quite dying wish, her wish is that she said if she was Prime Minister for the day, she'd allow a free vote in Parliament. And surely, if that was allowed, MPs would come to the right decision and allow people to make the adult, mature decision that it is time for them to go. If only, as your mother has stipulated, and you know from your dad as well, to spare their families the horrors of those last moments.
Well, I know that my friends who, I mean, I'm in that sandwich generation where we have kids and we have parents, and they may or may not be ailing. And my friends who have parents who are going through dementia, some of them quite advanced, it is the worst thing in the world to watch them. And from what they tell me, I wouldn't swap places with them for love nor money. And one of my friends' mother asks to die every single visit, repeatedly, over and over and over, doesn't really say anything else. What kindness is it to let her live? I have, this sounds like a strange segue, but I have a very, very old horse who is adorable and had a very good life, and he's over 30, which for a horse is pretty good innings. The vet has said he may not make another winter, we might have to euthanize him. And that is standard. That is par for the course. I would be inhumane if I didn't do that. And yet we don't apply the same rationale to people.
To look at a country where they have introduced assisted dying, there have been some criticisms of the system there, and that is in Canada, where there are a number of people campaigning against it who say that since it's been introduced, increasingly they feel that people are being pressurised to embark, let's say, down a pathway to death, and that there are unscrupulous companies who see a commercial opportunity, will offer the service and make money from it, and in some respects therefore sort of using means and encouragements that might persuade people who perhaps otherwise should be seeing out more months with their family. The difficulty, of course, in making it legal is then having to build, one would assume, a regulatory framework around it.
Well, why is that a bad thing? If we're going to do this, I'm sorry, you may be able to hear my delightful children who are on Christmas holidays and get slightly bored in the background. I'm hoping they're not using too many weapons against each other. They'll only be Nerf guns. But why would it be a problem to set up regulation around this? We have regulation around everything. I've been trying to adopt a dog, and the forms and licenses and things that go through that is ridiculous. So death and birth are possibly the most important moments in your life. And I say that as someone who has got married and loves my husband very much. But my death, I want it to be exactly how I want it to be. And I think coming together, making a law, making structures, making regulation that respects my opinion on my body and my death for everybody is the only sane way. It would stop the money makers who want to make money from people's deaths. And frankly, you know, if you're going to give someone a good death, make some money out of it. As long as you're helping them. I have to say, Dignitas does not look like a very lovely place. I would much rather have diamonds and champagnes and a hot bathtub. And it doesn't look like they supply that. And I think Mum would too. We both model ourselves on Dame Joan Collins, who is fabulous.
I mean, it's funny you said about animals and your horse. We were talking in the office earlier. I've had dogs all my life, and, you know, I've had to make that decision, you know, quite a few times now. This poor creature, it's time to put him or her out of their misery. And, you know, it's heartbreaking. But at that moment, you realise, you know, we made the right decision here. We did the right thing. And the fact that we can do that for animals and not people just strikes me as absurd. And in terms of people who say, oh, well, if we make this legal, then everybody will start pressurising old people into doing it or sick people into doing it. I think the chances of that are so infinitesimal that we should not let that be a blockade to common sense and allow this. So can I, that said, that's me talking. So you're looking forward to Christmas. What will you and Esther be doing?
So I have exploded Christmas all over my house. I don't know whether you can see it. I wrestled from the loft Mum's 1970s decorations, most of which fell apart in a shower of moth wings and possibly very noxious dust. But I've put them everywhere. I've decorated her rooms. I've decorated where she is. She is hopefully going to come to us. I have possibly 3 turkeys. I mean, I've gone overboard like you wouldn't believe, especially as I'm an agnostic Jew. But I think this is the Christmas. I have said that Santa and the elf on the shelf are definitely here for this year, so nobody is allowed to say anything otherwise to my family, please. And magic is very much here in my house for Christmas.
Because your mum said she didn't expect to see, I think she's 83 now, and I think it was June was her birthday. She said she didn't expect to see that. But now she's going to make Christmas. Yeah, she'll probably live forever, you know, so this discussion will become redundant. But to be serious, how is she?
So it's interesting. We got the diagnosis in January, and when we were speaking to the oncologist, she said, well, I would love to see spring. She and I are very keen on our gardens, and the labour of love that is planting bulbs in November should be seen. So she'd be annoyed if she didn't get to see the tulips. But do tulips come out in spring? Maybe it's daffodils. I'm not a knowledgeable gardener. I'm keen. So the oncologist said he would be surprised if she didn't make spring. And when we have tried to ask how long she's going to live, he fudges around and said, you'll die sometime between now and the next 10 years. Which is when when my granny, her mother, died when she was 93. Also not a very nice death. But so how is she is a big, big, big question. She is fine up to the next scan. That's how we live. We live from scan to scan. At the time of the scan that she previously had, she was okay. She's on this miracle drug. When it stops working, we'll have to reassess, and things happen quite quickly, which is why she has been brilliant and organised and thoughtful and gone ahead to make a safety net for herself.
Please give her all of our best wishes.